disaster, as it affects not only the comfort levels but also the problems that are displayed right here on the slide. So the first one is increased water usage. So increase you consume, basically you consume more water with higher pressures. So this, since this is a primary problem being faced in today's scenario, I'll talk a little bit more about this in my next slide. So the next problem is increased energy usage. So a good example of this would be water heaters. So basically any heater would consume more water, would consume more energy to heat water over a prolonged time with higher supply pressures. Number three is heavier water hammering effects. Now, for those of you who are not aware of the phenomenon of water hammering is basically the shattering sound that you hear inside your pipes or behind your walls. And this occurs because of back pressure when a valve is suddenly shut off. And this effect just grows heavier and heavier with faster closing valves or quick closing valves, like an automatic sensor based valves, like solenoid valves, like health faucets. So all of these are defined as quick closing valves. Now, the thing is, a back pressure, the magnitude of the back pressure normally is within 5 to 10 times that of your incoming pressure. So the higher incoming pressure that you have, the greater is your back hammering effect, which is going to spell disaster for your fittings and your plumbing system. Now, the next one, of course, is your damage to plumbing systems. So this is a result of the above problem that I specified, and also because of the ratings at which your fittings come these days. So about the first problem. So that's the only thing I'm going to talk a little bit detail about. So taking a quick look at this table in front of you. Now, the effects of water consumption in relation to supply becomes quite evident when you look at this table. These normally aren't the supply pressures directly given to the end users, but for purposes of understanding, I've just taken these pressures into consideration. Now, when you look at a normal supply pressure, which is 3.4 bar or 3 bar, which is an acceptable, comfortable pressure for especially high-end apartments, as opposed to 4.4 bar, you see a difference in water consumption for a fixed time. There's about 6 liters, and this is just from one fitting. You expand this to an entire apartment, to a community of apartments, a building, a block, or an entire country. The amount of water being wasted is tremendous, and this is just for a differential pressure of 1 bar. So this of course is the case for any other differential pressures. Now let's take an apartment complex as an example. All right, let's take in a hydrodynamic supply system, the flats on the ground floor are prone to higher pressures than the ones above them, obviously, by the example I've given before. Now let's take an activity as simple as brushing your teeth, right? So if two people in these flats were in the ground floor or the fourth floor, let's take these two as examples, and they're brushing their teeth and they keep their taps open for the same amount of time, it is obvious that the person on the lower floors will be consuming more water than the ones on the higher, mainly because of the supply pressure differential, right? So not only does this have an unfair disadvantage to the consumer, but the main problem is passive consumption. These guys on the ground floor aren't even aware that they're consuming more water. It's just happening without the knowledge, their knowledge, which is why I refer to this as a blind spot in water wastage, because the user has no idea, just because he's getting water pressure at 1 bar higher, that he's passively consuming more water. And that is a serious problem, especially in today's scenario where water deprivation is a huge thing. So the fix. So how do you tackle this problem? It's pretty simple. Use a pressure reducing valve. So apart from tackling the problem of high pressure, high supply pressures at consumption points, there surfaces a few other advantages of using PRVs, and they're on my slide here. So the first one is you have uniform pressure distributions into all houses, so there would be no erratic passive consumption patterns. So this is completely dependent on how you place your PRVs basically across your projects. Number two is being able to set a defined pressure, so you're able to achieve optimum comfort levels individually for what the end users require. So if you were to use PRVs on every branch line, you can set a particular pressure, 3 bar, 2 bar, whatever the users require, as long as they're comfortable. And mainly, the third one is demand being almost never a constant these days. That affects the functionality of pressure reducing valves. So the way the PRV is selected, and I'll explain a little more about this in detail in the future slides. But a PRV is selected based on flow rates. So if your demand flow rates are going to vary throughout the day, which is tremendously the difference is tremendously high, using just one PRV is going to be very difficult, because sizing a PRV for such flow rates is going to be hard. So this way you get that out of the picture. So basically you break them into smaller sizes, and using multiple of these PRVs on branches, does not allow for disruptions to the PRV's functionality. So this is particularly an interesting point, and we'll talk about this also a little more in detail in the coming slides. So what exactly is a pressure reducing valve? So there are many definitions to go with this. The most basic being it is a valve that does not allow your downstream pressure, that is your outlet pressure, to exceed the set point pressure. So it basically controls or regulates the pressure of the fluid flowing through it. They also go by the name pressure regulators. So PRVs come in different types based on the principle of operation. So before that, yeah. Since when have PRVs been used? They've been being used from the 19th century, which goes way back. And the first one ever made was about 2 meters high. And it was a very complex structure and had a very complex build also to it. And it is the first picture that you see here. However, until this very day, the very same fundamental principle of operation of pressure balancing is being adopted even today. So the 19th century principle of operation is being adapted today, but the valve now fits on the size of your palm. So quite a way that we've come. There are basically four main code requirements that drive the usage and of the PRVs. The most commonly used ones are below internationally and nationally that state that any PRV has to be used if your supply pressures cross 80 psi or 5.5 bar, that is. So coming to the type of PRV to be used, only IS code drives the standard. We'll cover the types of PRVs and the working on the next slide. So the type of PRVs are mainly categorized into two types. You have your piston operated pressure reducing valves, and you have your diaphragm operated pressure reducing valves. Now they have gotten these names based on the main component that drives the valve to regulate. So as the name suggests, a piston operated PRV employs a piston to move up and down, driving either the pressure down or up respectively. And the diaphragm operated PRV of course deploys a rubber diaphragm that drives to regulate the valve. Now, the diaphragm type PRV is further subcategorized into two types. You have your direct activating PRV and you have your pilot operated PRV. So again here, as the name suggests, it is the principle of construction deployed that they've been given this name. So in a direct activating PRV, the diaphragm is directly, here we go. So where was I? So in a direct activating PRV, the diaphragm is directly subject to the pressures of the outlet pressure and the spring tension, whereas that's why it has the name direct acting. And of course, the pilot in the pilot operated PRV, there is a pilot that regulates the pressure and the flow of the water onto the main diaphragm. So the internal working of this also will be covered. So it makes a little more sense of what I just said. So let's cover the piston type PRV at first. So in this slide, you'll see the main fundamental construction of any piston-operated PRV being used. So note what I said. It's a fundamental construction. Not everybody employs it. So it's just a basic thing that is being used. So as you can see here, there is a metal shaft which is so you have a spring, you have a metal disc, you have a shaft, and then you have a metal plate. So all of this is one component, and this is the heart of the valve, and uh, e- e- every effect that the metal plate goes through drives the regulation of the valve. So on the metal plate, you have two pressures acting. One is a spring tension, the spring tension acting above the metal plate, and the second is the output pressure acting below the metal plate. So the working basically goes like this. So you have a low pressure zone that is denoted next to the flow out. So you have the dotted lines spaced wide apart. So those are that is referred to as your low zone, and below that where the flow in. So that is basically your high zone. So every time the pressure in the low zone is lower or smaller than the set pressure, what happens is the spring tension above the plate will act in a way to push the piston down. So what happens when the spring pushes the shaft down, the opening basically the orifice will increase. So allowing more water to flow through into the low zone. So as water keeps flowing through, gradually what happens, your pressure also will start increasing. So your pressure increases, and stops at the point when the pressure below your plate and the pressure above the plate, which is a spring tension, matches. As soon as there's a pressure match happening above and below this plate, the shaft will stop moving. So you have a set pressure at your downstream end. Similarly, if what happens if your pressure increases, right? If the demand stops, so what happens if everybody closes their fittings and their taps? There'll be a pressure increase in your outlet. So what happens? The same outlet pressure reacts below this metal plate, and the pressure below the spring will be higher. So what happens? The spring pushes the pressure pushes the spring upward. So when the spring lifts up, the shaft also moves with it, and the opening here will start to close. So when the orifice starts closing, lesser amount of water is allowed to flow through. And by this way, in your low pressure zone, the amount of water flowing through will decrease. And because of this, the pressure also will decrease. And the same working. It keeps decreasing and decreasing until the pressure matches. So if you have a set point of 3 bar on your spring, until the pressure below the plate is again 3 bar, the PRV will begin to open and close. So by this mechanism of operation, you have a constant pressure at your outlet, and this is how the piston operated PRV works. So before I jump, so we have a main comparison between all the types of PRVs. Of course, I'm yet to cover the diaphragm operated PRV. Since I have the slide open, I'll just mention the two main disadvantages of this valve. So in a piston, any piston operated PRV, that is. So this type of PRV worked completely fine for the previous times, with especially low rise buildings and less densely distributed apartments. And but that has changed drastically these days. Demand levels are no longer stable, and the variations are too extreme for this valve to handle. So due to this, and merely because of the construction of the piston type PRV, it is not able to react as fast to varying demands, because they occur so quickly. There are so many people using fittings and using faucets and the showers so quickly. This valve does not respond in time. So inevitably, you would have water stoppages, you have low pressures, and something people today, a person of today, a consumer of today, cannot tolerate. And secondly is the wear and tear due to continuous working. Now, if your demand is going to keep variating through the day, it's obvious that the PRV is under constant working. It's constantly moving up and down. Now the problem is, in a piston operated PRV, you have metal-metal contacts. And if this valve is to continuously operate, obviously the metal is going to deteriorate. And also you have metal erosion which occurs. And again, your valve is inevitably going to fail much more faster at a much faster pace than it would have 20 years ago. It is only because the design of the plumbing system is being adapted to today's demands, and that's about it. Now coming to a diaphragm operated PRV, I'll explain the direct acting type first. So the working isn't too different from how the piston operated PRV works. It is basically just one component that mainly changes. The first one being instead of having a metal plate and a piston, the diaphragm operated PRV has a rubber diaphragm instead of metal. And number two is you have a dedicated feedback line. So the orifice or the opening from the output into the chamber here that you see is very small. So not all of the water is allowed to flow. So by regulating the amount of water that fills into the chamber, and the effect that it has below the diaphragm is much more steadier. So it's much more sensitive to your varying outlet pressure. So again, here there are basically two main forces acting on this rubber diaphragm. You have the force exerted by the outlet pressure that tends to push the diaphragm upward, thereby driving the valve towards a closed condition. And the second force is you have a force exerted by the spring tension that tends to push the diaphragm downward, thereby driving the valve towards an open position. Now, so let us assume that we have an incoming pressure of about 8 bar, right? And let's say you want a set pressure of 3 bar. So you set the pressure on the spring here. So every time the outlet pressure is lower than the set pressure, the same pressure through the feedback line acts just below the diaphragm. So what happens? The pressure above the diaphragm, which is your spring tension, is greater, and so the resultant force pushes the diaphragm downwards. The opening of the valve is directly proportional to this resultant force. So likewise, as vice versa, if the pressure below the diaphragm is higher than the spring tension, then obviously the diaphragm is going to be pushed upward because the pressure below it is greater. And because of this, the valve is going towards a closed position. So again, this closure rate is directly proportional to the resultant force again. Now, since a rubber diaphragm is being deployed, the variation is throughout the surface area of the rubber diaphragm. So there is more precise modulation happening throughout the area as opposed to a metal plate, which can move only up and down in two directions. But a rubber diaphragm is able to modulate throughout it because it contracts and expands in certain areas, and that gives a much more precise modulation, basically. So because of this very component, even if you have high variations in demand, it can be serviced with rather ease and much faster response times. So this is the last version of the diaphragm operated PRV, which is a pilot operated PRV. Now, um, this completely works on a mechanical and water based energy as its source. So it's called a pilot. It's called a pilot operated valve because there are two components that go into this. You have your basic valve, which is also referred to as a slave, and you have a pilot circuit, which is above this. So this pilot circuit is also called as the brain of the valve. We call it the brain of the valve because the functionality of the pilot circuit is what drives the modulation of the main valve. So, however, the pilot circuit reacts, the same reaction follows on the main valve. So it blindly follows orders from the pilot circuit. Now, I'll walk you through the working of this. So the working of it again is just two pressures acting on it. So, but it's a little more different than how the activating PRV works. Now, the dark blue area that you see here is the high pressure zone, and the light blue area is the low pressure zone. Now, as you can see, there is a dedicated feedback line from the output. So this line is only to take output pressure constantly as a feedback back into the system because the PRV operates based on your outlet pressure. And this is very important for variating demands because if your demand increases or decreases, immediately you have a feedback line taking that input and feeding it to the valve and telling the valve, hey, demand is either increased or decreased, so you have to either open or close. And all this is within seconds. So coming to the working, let's take the same example as I gave before in terms of values. Let's say I have an incoming pressure of about 8 bar and I have a set pressure of 3 bar. The set pressure will basically be set here on this pilot valve. So I set my 3 bar pressure here. I have 8 bar incoming pressure here. So we'll have to tackle the working of this PRV from the outlet. Now let's say my outlet pressure is 1, right? So the same 1 bar reflects onto this PRV, and this pilot valve will analyze. So my set pressure is 3 bar and my inlet and my outlet pressure is 1 bar. So what happens? This valve will open. The main pilot valve will open. And what you see here is something called a water chamber. So it's basically a chamber that allows water to fill in or pushes the water out. So that is important when it comes to this because let's say now this valve is in open condition because the outlet pressure is lower than the set pressure, and I have an incoming pressure of 8 bar. So this 8 bar will flow through here, and since this valve is open, it is not going to fill in this water chamber here. So instead, a majority of your water is going to push this plug up, push this diaphragm up, and start flowing through. So your pressure at the outlet will obviously start to increase. So from 1 bar, it will become 1.5 bar, 2 bar, 2.5 bar, 3 bar. Now, as soon as it hits 3 bar, the same 3 bar will reflect through the feedback line onto this PRV, and this pilot valve from a fully open position goes to a modulating position. Now, what is a modulating position? So basically, it is a position where that the PRV attains when water stops escaping from the water chamber, nor does water start filling it. So it basically goes into a modulating position. That's why we call it modulating. Now, it is so because the amount of volume of water that is filled here basically matches what is below the plug. So you have a constant 3 bar being maintained at the outlet. Now let's say demand again stops. So as soon as demand stops, immediately you're going to have a pressure increase in your output. So from 3 bar, let's say, jumps to 5 bar or 6 bar. So again, the same principle of operation. You have 6 bar reflecting onto the pilot. Now, since the pressure is higher, what happens? This valve closes. Once this valve closes, there's no way for water to flow through this. So instead, it will be redirected back into the water chamber. So once it is into the chamber, the volume of water into the chamber will keep increasing, and this valve will continue to stay closed. So as the volume of water increases into this chamber, it starts pushing the diaphragm towards a downward position, so towards a closing position of the main valve. So ultimately what happens, your pressure is decreased at the outlet because the amount of water flowing through decreases. So you from 6 bar, it becomes 5 bar, it becomes 4 bar, it becomes 3 bar. Again, once it hits 3 bar, this valve from a fully closed position goes to a modulating position. That is, water will stop filling into this chamber and the volume of water is maintained at that set point. So you have a constant 3 bar pressure again at the outlet. the same way, if demand suddenly increases where about 100 people open their taps, you have a pressure drop. It drops to zero point 0.5 bar. Again, this through feedback, it takes the feedback. The PRV will open, allow water to flow out of the chamber, and because of that, the volume of water flowing through the main valve will be higher. So because of this constant feedback from the outlet, the PRV is able to act almost instantaneously within seconds to service your demand. And that is why if you're using a PRV on a main line or a sub riser or a riser, it is best advisable to go in for a pilot operated valve merely because of the dedicated feedback line. Because of this, you don't have water starving, and it's also because the large orifice area, it's able to service also higher flow rates and lower flow rates. So the range at which it services is very large. So you never have the problem of low pressures or water starving, which is basically a nightmare when you talk about today's consumer. So this is a little, this is the internal construction of a pilot operated valve that you saw in the previous slide. So I wanted to show this because the construction's a little different and is not the same as any ordinary pressure reducing valve. So you have a little cut here, which allows the feedback pressure to flow and act on the diaphragm. So basically, if your pressure is higher than the set pressure, which is 3 bar that we've taken in my previous example, if it's 5 bar, what happens? The 5 bar pushes the plug upwards and the valve closes. So when it closes, water is allowed to fill into the water chamber in the previous in the water chamber of the main valve. Likewise, if your pressure decreases, the spring will push this shaft down, and water is allowed to flow through. So once water escapes from the chamber, the pressure will start increasing at the outlet. So it is, and this is the brain of the valve. So depending on this position of the valve, water will either fill the water chamber or escape from the water chamber from the main valve, thereby increasing or decreasing the pressure, which is why this is referred to as the brain. So this is the fundamental working of all the three types of the PRVs I've just explained, and that is available in the market and what is widely used worldwide. And of course, a lot of advantages and disadvantages go with these type of PRVs. So if you take a quick gander, of course, my presentation will be available for you guys to look at because, of course, I can't keep this on for a while for you guys to read. But to just tackle a few important points, I think metal erosion is very important because apart from just cavitation, if the construction is in a way that is going to is going to cause metal erosion, obviously your valve is not going to survive too well. So because of this, you will have to use a proper type of valve in your system. And another one is your output pressure feedback, which I've explained is very important in today's scenario because of your demand. If your demand is going to variate too much, you'll have to use a valve that has a dedicated feedback line. So make sure you always use a PRV which has a dedicated feedback line. And of course, your pressure loss. So any valve, any product, any mechanical valve, doesn't have to be a PRV. If it's going to have a pressure drop of more than 0.75 bar, it is not considered an efficient product at all. So it is very, very important to size your PRV accordingly. And that too, I'll speak about in my slides to come. And NBC. So it is very important to follow the National Building Code, of course. And in fact, NBC states that you have to use the NBC IS code states that you have to use diaphragm operated PRV in today's scenario. Now, coming to the problems. So when it comes to problems in a PRV, it's basically just two things. It's either you have a product with a valve, or there's a problem with the design or the selection of the valve. So what if there's a problem with the valve? This is very easy. So let me just finish with this. So number one is you're not using the right valve. You're not using a diaphragm operated valve. So solution is use a diaphragm operated PRV. Number two is the setting pressure. Now I've seen a lot of cases where when a PRV is supplied by any manufacturer, sometimes what happens is people just install it on the line and think it should start working, thinking that the pressure is already preset by the manufacturer for that particular project. But that is not the case. Each manufacturer has their own preset pressures. So it is up to the person installing the PRV to set the PRV at the right pressure for that particular project, because we have no idea which flow it's going to go on or where it's going to be used. So that's one major problem that I've noticed from my experience. And number three is bad water quality. Now, you cannot blame a pressure reducing valve for not working if your water quality is bad. So your solution here is that you can't do anything about India's water quality. So what you can do is use a pressure reducing valve with an inbuilt strainer. Now, just because you use a pressure reducing valve with an inbuilt strainer does not mean it's a fit and forget product. Every product has to be maintained, and putting a PRV in an accessible position with the strainer is a solution to this. Not just using a PRV with a strainer. It has to be accessible and it has to be maintained. So cleaning it once a week, once a 2 weeks, once a month, it completely depends on where the PRV is used, and it completely depends on the water quality as well. So that's about it when it comes to problems with the valve, with the PRV. It's basically one of these three problems that is always the cause of a problem. Next comes problems with designing and selection. Now, when it comes to pressure reducing valves, it is not the size of the PRV is not selected based on your line size. Just because you have a 100 or 150 line size does not mean you have to use a 100 or 150 pressure reducing valve. It does not work that way. So there are four main components that go inputs that go into selection of a pressure reducing valve. The main one is your flow rate. So any PRV has to be selected based on two things: your maximum flow rate and your minimum flow rate. You have to take these two into consideration when designing your PRV. And again, it varies for different manufacturers. So make sure you get the flow rate chart from your manufacturer and size your PRV accordingly, or ask them to do it for you. It's not too hard. Next would come operating pressures. Now, this is important because the fundamental use of a PRV is to reduce a high pressure to a lower pressure. Agreed. But that does not mean the PRV can reduce an extremely high pressure to an extremely low pressure. It doesn't work that way. So this is where cavitation comes into account. So make sure you ask the manufacturer for a cavitation chart and map your inlet pressure to your outlet pressure. I'll give you an example of this in my next slide, in fact. But as a thumb rule, your inlet pressure to your outlet pressure, the ratio has to be 3:1. There are a few cases where it can be higher, but then the average is 3:1 in most products available. So that is your in layman's terms, your output pressure can be 1/3 of your input pressure and not anymore. Next would be your flow curve or your pressure loss curve. Now, when you're reducing the size of your PRV in a 100 line, if you're using an 80 PRV based on your flow rate characteristic, there's obviously going to be pressure drop. So just because you're allowed to use a smaller size PRV doesn't mean there's not going to be any consequences, right? Your main issue is going to be two things, which is your velocity and your pressure drop. So make sure when you're sizing a PRV, you make your pressure drop is not more than 0.75 bar. Because as I said earlier, if it is the pressure drop across the PRV or any valve is more than 0.75 bar, is not an efficient product, and you're just wasting energy and you're wasting money. The next one would be a speed characteristic. Now, because you're reducing the orifice at which it flows, because your line size is obviously designed for 100 flow rate, if you're using a smaller valve, there's going to be a velocity acceleration it's going to be obviously a little higher, right? So make sure the orifice is in such a way that the PRV does not cause velocity acceleration more than 2 meters per second, because up to 2 meters per second you're completely fine. And it is very important to size it, the PRV. Oversizing it or undersizing it is absolutely out of the question, because it's going to cause your valve to fail. Oversizing can lead to wire draw, and if you undersize it, you have a lot of hammering and you have a lot of noise effects basically. So this is an example of a cavitation chart for a pressure reducing valve. So you have three zones. You have a red zone here, which is the cavitation zone. You have a yellow zone here, which is your transition zone. Sorry. And you have a green zone here, which is your working zone or your safe zone. So what you do is you get this from your manufacturer, and you have your inlet pressure and you have your outlet pressure. So make sure the intersection of the line between your inlet and your outlet pressure falls within the green area. It's as simple as that. So as far as the difference falls within your green area, your PRV is completely fine and should work perfectly without any problem. Now, while giving example of, you can't reduce a very high pressure to a very low pressure. Let's say you have 18 bar and you want to reduce it to 4 bar. So from 18 bar to 4 bar, it falls within the red zone, which is a cavitation zone. So you're going to have your vapors are going to come, metal erosion is going to occur, and the diaphragm is inevitably going to fail, because it's under so much stress, and because of continuous vapor being formed, the diaphragm will deteriorate, and the end connections are going to metal erosion will occur, and they'll just deteriorate. So that's a problem. And B is a transition zone where the possibility of cavitation may or may not occur. It's basically a gamble or a flip of a coin, basically. And I wouldn't recommend designing a PRV on this either. So as long as the intersection falls within the green zone, you're completely fine. The insulation. Now, almost any PRV can be installed horizontally or vertically, should not be a problem. But I wouldn't recommend installing a PRV vertically if it is more than 6 inches, mainly because the PRV is going to be so large and so heavy that the operation and the maintenance is going to be a headache. So insulation configurations. You have three basic configs of insulation when it comes to pressure reducing valve. You have a single regulator, that is a single use PRV. You have a two-stage serial reduction, that is if you want to reduce a very high pressure to a very low pressure, then you'll have to go in for this. And of course, you'll have a parallel or low flow bypass. Now, before I jump to this, I just want to cover two quickly, two topics that about PRV's installation. Now, if you look at the building on the right, normally I've seen this in a couple of projects down south. A PRV is being used on the main line. No, I don't get this. So if I have a high pressure, if you're designing a pump for let's say 6 bar. So here the example is 6 bar. If you're designing your pump for a head pressure of 6 bar, why use a PRV to immediately break this pressure to 3 bar? You're losing energy. You're wasting money on a larger size pump when you can just use a pump with 3 bar. And also a big problem with this is if you only use one PRV on the main line and it's a mechanical unit, something's going to happen and something might fail. So if this fails, your entire building is under scrutiny. Nobody's going to get water because the pressure is going to be too high for the guys at the bottom floor to consume water. And so the recommendation that we normally give is a single use PRV at every point on every branch line. So the advantage of this I've already covered previously, where you have comfortable pressures, you can set individual pressures, and if there's going to be a problem also, only that particular flow is going to face problems. And again, it's very highly unlikely that's going to occur because the wear and tear is distributed across 6 or 7 PRVs as opposed to just one PRV. This, of course, is in a small building, but in a larger building, the design will change a little bit. You install PRVs only where your pressure is is greater than 3 bar. So basically, on these floors, your pressure is less than 3 bars, so you don't have to use a PRV there. And that's about it. This is the same. Just wanted to cover this really quickly. All right. Now coming to two-stage serial reduction. Now, like I said, there are applications where you'd want to reduce a ridiculously high pressure to a very low pressure. And what do you do in that case? So what you do is you basically break down the pressures into two parts. And this type is basically used if your pressure is greater than 15 bar and if you want to reduce it to 3 bar or so. So let's take an example here in the diagram. You have a supply pressure of 16 bar. So you use first a PRV 65 mm as an example based on whatever flow rate calculations. So you reduce 16 bar to 10 bar, and then you reduce 10 bar to 3 bar. So you're breaking down the pressures, and this way you can the PRV will not enter cavitation, and you have a fine working pressure reducing valve. So you basically break down. This can be 3, can be 4, depending on what your inlet pressure and your outlet pressure is. So this is a parallel installation. Now, some of you might confuse this for a pressure reducing station. It is not a pressure reducing station. It is a parallel installation. So the fundamental reason for why this was and why this is in the first place is demand. So if your demand is going to be very high, because morning you're going to have extremely high demand, in the afternoon you're going to have moderate demand, in the night you're going to have extremely high demand again, and then later into the night you're going to have very low demand. Now, one particular size of a PRV cannot handle such a vast range of flow rates, right? And also the opening and closing of the pressure reducing valve cannot be that precise for every flow rate along the way. So what happens, what you can do as an alternative is you break down the PRV into two sizes, right? So let's say you have an 100 mm line. So you break this down as an example here. I've broken it down to 65 mm just to show you. So let's say I'm using two 65 mm in parallel. I set one PRV at 3 bar and the other PRV is set at a pressure little higher than my set pressure. So if I want 3 bar, I set this at 3 bar and I set this at 3.5 bar or 4 bar. Now let's look at how what advantage this poses, right? So let's talk about demand on the outlet. Now, if my demand is just moderate, right, my pressure drop will be much lower. So let's say it'll come to about 4 bar or 3.5 bar. Once it reaches 3.5 bar, only this PRV will open and begin to operate. This will not open because it's set at 3 bar. So this PRV will open and service for your low demand. Now, when demand increases, let's say when about 80 people again want to use it, the pressure drop at the outlet will obviously increase, right? So once it increases, that is from 3.5 bar, it will fall down to 3 bar. As soon as it hits 3 bar, this valve will remain to be opened and this valve will freshly open. So you have two PRVs working in parallel simultaneously to service your high demand. And when there's moderate or low demand, this PRV closes, only one PRV will begin to operate. So it is through this principle where you deploy two PRVs in parallel to service high demand and low demand. Again, this is advantages because you're using two smaller size PRVs as opposed to 100 mm PRV, and you don't have water stoppages during low demand, which is basically when the main problem is. The PRV won't be able to operate for such low flow rate, for such low flow rates, because obviously the flow rate, low flow rate For a 65 the characteristic will be much lower than as opposed to 100 so that makes sense. And also the main advantage is the wear and tear again. The working is not just upon 100 PRV, rather it's being distributed among 265 PRVs. So the longevity and the lifetime of both the PRVs are increased tremendously, in fact. So this quickly, so this is basically a pressure reducing station suggested by NBC in part 9. So you have a pressure reducing station where you have a pressure reducing valve on the bypass line as well as on the main line. You have two individual strainers. So all of this is completely fine, but at the end of the day, your pressure reducing valve has to be installed in an accessible position, an accessible place. If it's not accessible, it is not a fit and forget product. It has to be serviced. It has to be maintained. These trainers have to be serviced and they have to be maintained. So as long as that is followed, and if this pressure reducing station model is followed, your PRV should work like a charm. Now, a problem with pressure reducing stations that mostly we've heard is space. Space constraints is a huge challenge for consultants, for designers, for architects, because it's lesser space to sell for builders. And I get that it's a total challenge. But what do? You need two valves to service them. So as an alternative in a pilot operated valve, you have one main body, you have one slave body, and you have two pilots. So there's one pilot installed on the front side of the valve, and just behind this valve you have another pilot system being operated, and the working is the same as the parallel configuration that I just explained. So you set one pilot at a higher pressure than the other pilot. So when there's low demand, only this pilot operates and will service for your low demand. When there's high demand, this pilot will also open in addition to this, and the main valve will open and then services for your high demand flow rate. So worst case scenario, even if you do have a problem with the PRV, it's mostly going to occur only in your pilots, because your main valve has no moving parts. It's just one large diaphragm which is well protected, which is EPDM. It's not easily going to degrade either. So if worst case there is a problem, it's going to be in one of the pilots. So even if one of the pilots fail, the other pilot is always going to take over and just ensure that your at the end of the day your the consumer does not get more pressure required. So maximum is going to be about 0.5 bar, a little more depending on which pilot fails. So this is a good alternative in case space is a huge constraint. So this is a pressure reducing valve station that is properly installed. It is a great installation. The components used are perfect. There's nothing being left out of the system, and this is basically in a municipal supply line. That is why a lot of care is taken. But air vents are used, gate valves, strainers are used in both the lines, and this is typically what NBC suggests, minus the air valves, of course. So just wanted to show this as an example. And I think with this, we conclude our session. And thank you so much for sitting in. And I'd be glad to take your questions now. On to you, Minesh sir.
Yes, sir. I think Samir had a question. Can you ask your question, Samir?
Now we can have questions. We can push the questions now on this presentation, and
yeah,
on.
Samir Sheikh had a question. If
Okay.
volume of water increases, outlet pressure also increases. I'm not clear about the question, so I would like, if Samir is there, he can speak up. He can ask his question.
I think he has a problem with his mic.
There was one more person, Nilakant Rahul. Nilakant sir, can you speak up? I think your question was, can I use low zone and high zone in a high building?
Sorry, sir.
All right. So let me. I've not fully understood the question, but let me see if I've understood it. You're basically saying, can you use a low pressure zone and a high pressure zone in your building? So this again is completely dependent on your flow rate. So the consultant already has these values with them. So what I suggest is you take out the pressure reducing chart from the manufacturer. You tabulate both of this with that chart. You see if your low pressure and high pressure fits within the same size of the PRV. If it does, well and good, great. You can use the same PRV and go ahead with it. But if it is variating, then you'll have to use two PRVs, one for a low zone, one for a high zone. So it's a little complicated when it goes to this, but practice makes perfect. You should be fine once you start doing this. I hope I've been able to. Is that if that's a question? I hope I've been able to answer it.
Yeah, I think so. That was the question.
All right, great.
There is a question from someone. He says range of upstream and downstream pressure that can be applied.
ଏ ଚଣ୍ଡୁ ଖରାପ ହେଇଯାଉଛି କଣ ଏଟା ଦେଖିଲେ
So, sorry, can you repeat that, sir? Range of upstream and downstream pressures that can be applied. All right, yeah. So that is possible as well, and it depends on the manufacturer, but there are different ranges available. It mainly comes in three ranges. You have a low pressure range, you have a standard pressure range, and your high pressure range. I am not sure of what is being provided by the other manufacturers, but we do make this type. So we give in. You have 1 to 4 bar, you have 4 to 12 bar, and you have 12 to 18 bar into these different zones. But it should be the same as what other people follow. But yes, different zones, different pressure ranges are available for the outlet pressure. So that is also a very important thing that you'll have to specify when sending an inquiry or anything, or at least check with the manufacturer.
There is a question from Anishka Mapuska. The question is, if file requirement is not met, what problem arises?
So if you're talking about cavitation, like I said, if your PRV enters cavitation, there's going to be heavy deterioration of your diaphragm because of metal, and metal erosion also is going to occur. Because if your very high pressure is being reduced to very low pressure, obviously you're going to have wire draw and you're going to have velocity acceleration. So because of this, basically vapor bubbles are being produced. So thousands and thousands of these vapor bubbles come, they start bursting with mini pressures. So all of this causes metal erosion and deterioration of the diaphragm. So it is not advisable to use if you're in cavitation zone. So again, every manufacturer has their own cavitation zone, so always check with them. But 3:1 is what is normally followed because the type of diaphragm and the surface area used is almost the same across many manufacturers. But I would still suggest getting it from that particular manufacturer just to be safe.
Okay. Then there is a question from Pawan Saxena. He is asking that for 75 floor residential building, how to select that how much PRV is to be installed.
All right. So Pawan, to answer your question, there is no guided way for me to just tell you off the bat how to use the PRVs. It completely depends on the schematic. So I'll have to take a look at your schematic to see how many zones you have, and so basically I'll need to know every zone is servicing how many floors. So depending on that, I will calculate what outlet pressure is required for that PRV. If that outlet pressure is sufficient to service all of those floors, if it's not, then you'll have to use number of PRVs will have to increase. So it is completely dependent on how the design of the project is.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Sanjay is saying, Pawan, that the water supply has to be looked from in totality in terms of the distribution to the end user. Depending upon the project and depending upon your distribution scheme, whether the entire 75 floors are divided into what number of zones, the requirement of PRVs can be ascertained. Whether it is an upfill system or a downfill system, that also plays an important role in deciding the number of PRVs. So all in all, there is no thumb rule as how many PRVs will be required for 75 floor buildings, but it's purely a design input, which the consultant would always design it, and accordingly he'll advise you. Then there is a question from Mr. There are many questions. It has gone up.
So I think what we can do is to not allow too many questions to go unanswered. I think my team is making a note of these questions. If you guys could leave your email ID or a way of contacting you, maybe we can get back to you with your,
we'll clear as soon as possible. See,
yeah.
Dilip Patil asked, can we check exact pressure on the PRVs?
No, so some PRVs come with a dial which you can set you can set your pressure, so it has your indication to set your downstream pressure. A few PRVs have that, but for those who don't, you'll have to use a pressure gauge in your inlet and your outlet. In fact, it is recommended that you use a pressure gauge for inlet and outlet.
So a correct installation is to have a pressure gauge post and pre and post of a PRV. Only Absolutely. Then you can get the exact pressure pre and upstream and downstream of the PRV. Then there is someone is asking, as per the recommendation, to go with a pilot operation is better than other types. Obviously, pilot operation is better depending upon your type of the project.
Yeah, type of project and also your line size. So greater the line size, like I said, it's completely dependent on flow rate. So if your line size is a 150 mm or 200 mm, it is definitely recommended to go in for a pilot operated PRV because the orifice of the PRV is so large, it will be able to operate for such flow rates. If not, that might be a problem. So yes, it's completely flow rate dependent.
Can we use two stages of PRV instead of using in every floor? Avdut Kurnikar. Again, that's a design distribution. Your consultant or your designer has to decide on this. There is no point that whether to use a two-stage PRV or a PRV or independent flow. That again depends upon your whether it's an upfit system or a downfit system. Depending upon that, your consultant might design whether a two-stage PRV is required or a PRV is required at every floor. Then there is a question: how much space required for a parallel PRV installation in a vertical building?
Again, that depends on the size of the PRV and the manufacturer. Again, so it is yeah.
Now there is one question also: what type of material is used for construction of PRV?
So your PRVs mainly come basically in two types. You have your forged brass, you have cast iron, you have ductile iron. This is mainly what is suggested also to use. But yeah, it depends again on the manufacturer and where you get your pressure reducing valve from. But the most commonly used ones are forged brass, cast iron, and ductile iron.
Exactly.
I would recommend forged brass and ductile iron because they are food grade and they're good for plumbing systems. There's no possibility of leaching of different other materials from the valve. So
correct.
Yeah.
Then what is the ideal distance? Mr. Vinod is asking what is the ideal distance about the first step of the PRV to be installed?
So if you're talking about spacing, it is always recommended to have a 5D distance between between the PRV station and any other bend or any other valve. A 5D distance is recommended, but an acceptable one is 3D. Yeah. So between 3D is minimum, but 5D is suggested. Then so 5D is basically 5 times the diameter of the valve.
Exactly. Samir is asking any typical flow turn down ratio suggested.
Sorry?
Samir is asking whether any typical flow turn down ratio suggested.
I do not understand that.
No, I didn't understand. Samir, you can elaborate what your question is.
Yeah. Hello.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, Samir, this side. I just wanted to understand whether the flow rates we are catering to, do they have any typical turn down ratio because of PRV selection?
Again, so like I said, the selection completely depends on the flow rate. So you take these two flow rate values, which is your maximum flow and your minimum flow. You take these two values. You ask the manufacturer for a flow rate chart. You put these two values on the chart against that one size. If both these values satisfy that size, then you're good to use that size of the PRV. But if either one does not fall within it, then you do not use that size of the PRV. Then you will have to break it down into two stages where you use one for high pressure, one for high flow and one for low flow.
Right. Then there is a question. Hope Samir, it's clear.
Yeah, I am clear. Thanks a lot.
Now, then there is a question: is there a pressure setting possible at the top of the PRV?
Yes, the pressure setting will be on top of the PRV. So you'll have a small screw type for any PRV. So you basically turn it anti-clockwise or clockwise to either reduce or increase the pressure. But again, you'll need a pressure gauge to exactly know what the pressure setting is.
Samir Sheikh has asked, normally gauge for which pressure shown, either it inlet or outlet. Pressure gauges have to be installed inlet and outlet both.
And outlet pressure. But I think if your question is if the pressure gauge is installed on top of the inbuilt on the PRV, then if it is a small size PRV, it is normally for the outlet pressure because the inlet pressure is already anyway designed and we know what the pressure is. So if the pressure gauge is on the valve, it is normally to indicate the downstream pressure. But on a pilot operated valve, you have a pressure gauge at the inlet as well as the outlet. So.
Okay. Someone is asking whether PRVs have inbuilt strainers.
Few PRVs do. Again, it depends on the manufacturer that you choose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recommend using a pressure reducing valve with an inbuilt strainer because it's very important to protect the diaphragm. As long as that is fine.
Not all manufacturers have, but some of them have.
Some do, yes. So you will have to ask your manufacturer if they do have it.
Then Johnson Joseph is asking for a particular dia of PRV. Will there be reduction of flow rate while reducing the pressure?
Yes and no at the same time, because again, it depends on the manufacturer. If the manufacturer has a lower orifice inside the PRV, because a 50 mm PRV should have a 50 mm orifice, but there are cases where you have a 25 mm orifice too. So it's always good to check the GA drawing of the PRV and then go ahead with it.
Exactly.
But yes, there would be restrictions in flow and in higher pressure drop if the orifice inside the PRV is smaller than the connection size.
Then there is one another question from Mr. Ranjit Shankar. Is there any specific requirement in IS codes which states one working plus one standby configuration of a PRV?
Well, the NBC does, yes, and the IS code too. If you take out the IS document, so once I share the PRV, all the codes are there in my fourth slide, if I'm not wrong. So you can just Google those codes and then look at the diagram. But NBC is a good book to take a gander at.
Yes.
Part 9. Part 9, I think section 2, if I'm not wrong, the diagram is there of the pressure reducing station, and it does indeed state that you have to use a PRV on the bypass line as well. It's
On the
very
bypass
important.
line as well, yeah.
Yes.
Then Vinod is asking one question. When we provide a bypass for the PRV, will there be any variation in the performance if we install the PRV on the bypass side and not on the main line due to site constraints? Obviously, yes.
There would be, yes. I mean, why would you put a PRV on the bypass line and not on the main line? If it's the other way around, it'd be fine. But no, I don't recommend that installation.
Not installing PRV on the main line doesn't suffice your problem, because you need to reduce the pressure in the main lines.
Absolutely.
Bypass line is always for the maintenance point of view. So you need to install it on the main line for sure.
Main line. Yes, definitely.
Sheikh Mukherjee's question is already answered. Is vertical fixing PRV better than the horizontal PRV? That is already answered. Up to 6 inches, horizontal, vertical, both is fine. Higher the size, more than 6 inches, horizontal is more preferred. That was already a part of the slide. Sahil wants to ask one question. Sahil, are you able to hear? You can post your question.
Yeah,
Sahil.
hello.
Yes,
Am I
hi, Sahil.
audible?
Yeah, Sahil.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask you that there was one site. What happened was the tube well was already installed at the site when we got the control of the site. The outlet pressure at the tube well was around 12 or 13 bars,
Okay.
and the due to some security reasons, it was a very high profile bungalow. So due to security reasons, the client didn't wanted to construct any underground tank. So he
Okay.
directly wanted to fill the overhead tank by the tube wells.
Okay.
But the water quality there from the tube well was not good enough. So we wanted to install the filters and all. But the pressure at the inlet of the filters were too high, about 12 bars.
Okay.
So is it possible? Is it the correct way? Like if we can install the PRVs at the tube well, then the inlet goes into the tanks. Would it damage the pumps, the borewell pumps, in any way?
So let me get this straight. So I'm a little confused with this. Now you said your inlet pressure is 12 bar, but your outlet pressure was how much did you say?
No. The outlet pressure from the
Mhm.
tube well was
Mhm.
which was given to us was 12 bars.
Was 12 bar. All right. And so this is basically just used to fill your tank.
Yeah, but the pump selection was obviously done incorrectly. But we
Yeah,
put it
because for a villa, a 12 bar is a ridiculously
it
high
was
pump.
it was incorrectly done by the
Okay.
pump vendor previously.
No, but
So-
it was a 12 bar pressure. It was a 12 bar pressure.
Yeah,
And you are talking of a tube well, which is a submersible pump, right?
yeah, submersible pump.
So
borewell
12 bar,
pump.
12 bar pressure was at the outlet or
Outlet,
discharge side of
at
the
the
pump.
at
So
the
what was the depth
At-
of the tube well?
no, at the top of the outlet pipe. At the
Oh.
outlet pipe,
Oh,
Oh,
so at the
that
tank
was
you're getting
top.
12 bar pressure.
at the tank I'm getting 12 bar pressure.
Wow, great.
So
Yeah, that.
the,
So I think what you can do is it's
happened,
not too much
what
of a
happened
problem.
was the pump vendor had initially met the client and he selected the pump himself. What he
Okay.
did was he calculated the horizontal distance and converted that to the head. So it was a big blunder mistake which he did there.
Shahil, to cut short, the first thing what I would suggest is, instead of providing a PRV and reducing the pressure forever for the life cycle of the pump,
Yeah.
best option is to replace the pump with the
Yeah, that was
appropriate.
one. That was
that-
one option. I'll discuss that thing like personally sometime. But the thing was we weren't able to change the pump. That was our first solution only. We weren't able to
Wow.
change. It was something very like political kind of a site. So so I wanted to ask you that is it okay if we install a PRV directly at the tube well outlet?
You can put it. I would recommend putting it at the as far away from the pump as possible, because let gravity do its work of reducing pressure. So what you do is you can use a PRV at the just at the inlet of your tank, and from 12
Over
bar
a
you
tank.
can definitely reduce it to about 5 bar. It should be fine, 5 or 6 bar.
No, he's talking
Would-
of a bungalow. He is talking of a bungalow project. So bungalow project, the height would be hardly 10 meters, less
Barely
than 10
anything.
meters.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
Less
correct.
than 10 meters. So it's not going
Yeah.
to make a huge difference. But yeah, obviously, installing at the inlet of the overhead tank, you will be saving it that additional kg pressure or something.
So would it damage the pump in any way, the borewell pump?
there's no saying, but of course, your again your
if
pump
the
is
flow rates, if the flow rates are matched, if the flow rates
Absolutely.
is matched, then there will not be any problem to that. Then cannot be any problem to the pump. If
Okay.
so your pressure reduce, so your PRV selection it becomes very important with respect to the flow rate of your pump.
Okay. Okay.
Don't go by the pipe sizing, but go by the
Right.
flow rate of the pump
Of the pump, yeah.
pump, and accordingly your PRV should be selected.
Okay. Okay.
Also, sir, I think it is very important that pressure reducing valves, just cannot be bought and purchased and then fitted.
Yeah, definitely.
Or
Definitely.
pressure reducing
Yeah.
valves should be bought from companies who are also able to do the commissioning, because commissioning, setting of the pressure the setting of the PRV, and finally giving a detailed report on the commissioning of the PRV is very important, because the days have gone, when earlier you just fit a PRV and forget it. Because as Sanjay said rightly, in certain sites you've seen that the setting pressure generally from factory is about 3 bar. And when we go to site and when our engineers go to site and see the setting has not been changed at all, and people in fact don't know also how to reset. Obviously they'll not know, because they're not the different PRVs have got different type of settings, different gadgets also to use to reset the PRV. So it is very important that companies offer, PRV should be bought from companies who also offer the commissioning of the PRVs, and also probably the servicing. And maybe you can also enter into an AMC of the with the company, so that they come and check the setting and the proper working, and also also cleaning. As Sanjay has said once again, that people buy PRVs with inbuilt filters. Now inbuilt filters, yes, but when we go to service it, the PRVs are fitted in such places where it is inaccessible. So how do you service the PRV? Now, when you're buying with an inbuilt filter, you'll have to clean the filter. Then cleaning the filter is once in a month at least, looking at the water quality. Or how are you going to service it? So it's very important that these things are taken into account. And of course, as I said, most importantly, commissioning of the PRVs has to be done by the manufacturer. Yeah, Manish bhai.
There was one question by Samir Sheikh asking about the preventive maintenance of the PRV. Sanjay, can you just say a couple of lines on that?
Sure. So I'm not a fan when I hear of preventive maintenances itself, but like I said, if it's a PRV with an inbuilt filter, it completely depends on your water quality. The frequency at which you'd have to maintain it would increase as the quality of the water is worse and worse. But normally we would recommend at least cleaning the PRV once in a month at least, because it is now becoming a case where PRV is becoming the heart of a plumbing system. And if anything happens to the PRV, there's a lot of drawbacks and a lot of disadvantages that go into it. Apart from just water wastage, you have fittings that might explode. You have water stowages for people who really need it. So I would recommend more frequent maintenance of the PRVs, at least once a month. But if your quality of water is very, very bad, at least once in 2 weeks at least. So it's very simple. It's just opening a filter, allowing you to drain, and then putting it back in. You should barely take your maintenance team anytime. So you take care of the PRV and we'll take care of you is my advice.
Okay. Sanjay, any other questions? Any other questions? We can take a couple of questions if anyone wants.
Mr. Arun has a question regarding recommended pH and hardness. So pH level
Again here, so your hardness, let it be as low as possible. There's no recommended value per se. It's just a value that is not recommended, because if your hardness value is too high, what happens? There'll be scale formation on top of your diaphragm, and if your scale formation on top of the diaphragm, your diaphragm will be unable to modulate, and if it's not able to modulate, your PRV is not going to work. So the basic, I would recommend, what water you use for consumption or for bathing, you use the same. The PRV would be recommended to be in the same scenarios, which of course is not possible, a little too much to ask for, but
There's one more question. There's one more question regarding what type of pressure gauge to be used on both sides, inlet and outlet, whether Bowden, SS tube gauge, or anything.
A commercial pressure gauge should be fine, as long as your the range of the pressure gauge is selected rightly, because your inlet and your outlet will have different. Your inlet might use a 0 to 16 or 0 to 21 bar, and your outlet will use a different, much lower range of pressure gauges. But the type of pressure gauge can just be a commercial one. It doesn't have to have like glycerin filling or anything, because the PRV does not suddenly open and close. You don't have much of a hammering effect that's going to show incorrect readings. So just a normal commercial Bowden type pressure gauge should be fine. A 4-inch pressure gauge for a pilot operated PRV, and a 2-inch or a 3-inch for the other valve should be fine, because it's very important to see what pressure is there, and if that visibility is lacking, then you're just going to have a harder time to set the PRV. So that is the only recommendation when it comes to dial size.
One more question from Mr. Bharat. PRV is ideal for only hydropneumatic systems?
I already asked. I already replied on the chat.
All right. Okay. Oh yeah, I just saw your reply. It just popped up for me.
I already replied on the chat. No issue.
Great.
Sanjay.
Yes, sir.
Today we had 100 participants all through the session.
Okay.
And I had at least 30-40 more requests coming in. They wanted to join from Ahmedabad chapter. I mean, the host chapter members were also not able to join.
Okay.
They were delayed in connecting.
All right. Okay.
I received some messages from our NEC group also, which they were not able to join.
Okay.
Indore chapter also they were not able to join, because they were all late by 5 or 10 minutes. So can we have another session tomorrow? I have said that we'll be arranging another session for with the same topic. But now it depends upon your availability and your convenience.
Absolutely, sir. I'd be more than happy to do this
again. No problem. We can have it tomorrow. You tell us the time, and
so we can have the same session. We can have the same timing, same slot, 4:30 to 6.
Fine.
Sure, works, sir.
Done.
Right?
Yeah.
Done.
That done. Perfectly. We'll schedule accordingly.
Just create one meeting ID.
We'll do
schedule
that.
A meeting for tomorrow. Sure. And we'll pass on to everyone, so that those who have not connected today, they can connect tomorrow, and we can have the same session tomorrow.
And guys, we are getting lots of requests to share this recorded version on the email ID, but the file size is sizable. So what we will do, we will upload this recorded version on the YouTube, and we would share you the YouTube link. That will be very easy.
Now, see, Vinod, what I'll hold on. Vinod, I'll reply to this.
Yeah.
Please unmute. There is much of disturbance.
Go ahead, Minej bhai.
See, what we will do is for these presentations.
Yeah.
These presentations cannot be shared directly unless otherwise they are uploaded on the YouTube, because Zoom doesn't allow to share the recording straight away. First of all, it is to be uploaded on the YouTube, and then through YouTube link has to be generated, and then it can be shared with all. So what we will do is, Vinod will upload this on YouTube and share a link with me in a day or two. Once it is done, we will share this link with all the chapters, all the NEC members from the NEC group. Respective chairmen and NEC members can pass it on to their respective chapter members.
That's a good idea.
Sounds perfect. Right. Yep, done.
So this presentation can be shared with everyone, right?
Done.
And in the meanwhile, sir, tomorrow we are having at the same time, 4:30.
Yeah,
right?
4:30 we start, and same will start 4:30 sharp.
Yeah.
So everyone has to connect. Sunday, just connect 10 minutes earlier, because today someone has to sacrifice so that you can get in.
I'm sorry for that, but yeah, I'll make sure I'm a little early tomorrow.
So just be on time 10 minutes earlier, because we'll be logging in at 4:15.
I'll be there at the same time. Yes.
Right? We know we will connect.
Yes,
We
we'll do
normally
that.
connect at 4:15 so that everyone can log in before the time.
Perfect. Yeah,
And-
I'll connect with you guys then at the same time.
Right, and then we will start sharp at 4:30.
Done.
Yep.
Done, sir.
Sounds good.
Right? Okay. Thanks
All right.
to all.
Perfect.
Thank you so much,
Sanjay.
Minister. Thank you all for joining. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Abbas bhai. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Manish bhai.
Thank you. Thank you,
Right.
Vinod sir.
I'm closing this meeting now.
Yep. Thank you all.